Here we go.
Hello guys, I'm CBMF Productions, and after a 10-month hiatus, we are finally back to the DC film Retrospective. Today's film is a sequel to the film that most would say was the first big success of the DCU back in 2017, starring the Amazonian goddess herself in the retro era, Wonder Woman 1984. After the huge success of the first Wonder Woman film in summer 2017, Patty Jenkins, who initially signed on to do only one Wonder Woman film, quickly spoke with the producers at Warner Bros. In DC and started coming up with ideas for a sequel, and in the fall of that same year, she was officially signed on to direct a sequel, along with Gal Gadot reprising her role as a title character, and Chris Pine set to come back as Steve Trevor, and she came up with an idea that would be more of a standalone film rather than a straight sequel in the DCU continuity. Then the script was developed until the summer of 2018 when it finished and was ready to start shooting, along with the title being released and the film beginning principal photography, with it wrapping up in December that same year, with additional reshoots taking place the following year. The film was originally slated for a December 13, 2019 release, but due to Warner Bros. Not wanting to go head to head with Star Wars Rise of Skywalker at the box office, it was pulled forward to November 1st, 2019. Due to the still upcoming James Bond film No Time to Die, pushing its release date to spring 2020, and Warner Bros. Seeing an opportunity in that. But it was eventually delayed 7 months to June 5th, 2020, because Warner Bros. Thought that the film would perform better in the summer, seeing as how big the first film was. And that's where the story should have ended, but due to the coronavirus spreading like a wildfire in the beginning of 2020, and still continuing to this day, as the time of this recording, this film is one of several big budget films that experienced a handful of delayed release dates faster than you can say New Mutants, with the film being delayed 3 times before finally releasing. The first being August 14th, as this film, along with Christopher Nolan's Tenet, trying to be the films to welcome back audiences to movie theaters for Warner Bros. After being shut down for several months, or the ones that were open not getting any noteworthy titles. But with Tenet also being pushed back eventually to Labor Day in the US, Wonder Woman got that ripple effect and was pushed to October 2nd. But because Tenet didn't perform well as Warner Bros. Was hoping, not wanting Wonder Woman to have that same fate and compete with Tenet, considering all the films that were meant to follow Tenet jumped ship and moved to 2021 or onto streaming, the film was pushed to its final release date, at least for the US, being Christmas Day of 2020. But there's an extra factor that I haven't mentioned yet. This film wouldn't get the typical theatrical exclusive treatment that Tenet got. Instead, as a failsafe, Warner Bros. Decided in an unprecedented move that it would release simultaneously in theaters and also on their new streaming service HBO Max, as a boost to try to get their subscriber numbers. Because it's not nearly on the level of success of a Netflix, Hulu, or Disney Plus. And despite being an isolated announcement, this would eventually lead to Warner Bros. Announcing that their entire 2021 theatrical slate would release under this new hybrid state. Bars! And with how much backlash and possible lawsuits may come out of it, despite Gal Gadot and Patty Jenkins speaking fondly of the decision, although it's rumored that they were paid their bonuses in their contracts, which was around $10 million, unlike most of the other people that made the other Warner Bros. Movies going into streaming, to speak good about the service. But that's another topic for a different video. We'll see if this release actually pulls through, but that's for the future to decide. The film has since dropped as promised and released in its hybrid state on Christmas Day, despite being released in other territories a week or so beforehand, and not doing the best box office wise. And it looks like it won't do much better here, and will cost Warner Bros. More than it will profit. But again, that's for the future to decide. Now with the history out of the way, let's get into the plot. The film was set in 1984, no shit, 67 years after the events of the first Wonder Woman, where Diana Prince still looks exactly the same as she did in World War I, and is saving people and stopping crime whenever she can, under her superhero alias, and blocks any evidence that proves that she exists that isn't in-person interaction, like destroying security cameras and such. In this part of her life, Diana finds herself working as an anthropologist for the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. While there, she meets a new coworker of hers, Barbara Ann Minerva, played by Kristen Wiig, an unpopular, shy, and insecure woman who obsesses over Diana's qualities and wants them. The film gets set in motion when a group of thieves try to steal some black market artifacts hidden in a small jewelry store. After Wonder Woman stops them in their tracks, the FBI sends the artifacts to the Smithsonian Institute for them to study and identify the objects. Barb and Diana look through them until they come across a very interesting one. This ancient stone that has Latin text on it that promises anyone wish the person who holds it desires. After Barb asks Diana what she would wish for, she wishes in her head for the love of her life, Steve Trevor, who died in the last movie decades prior, to come back since she hasn't been able to find somebody like Steve since World War I. And Barb, after being assaulted by some drunk guy in the street late at night before Diana saves her, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and she wishes for her to have the qualities of Diana. And per the stone's rules, they both get what they want. With Barb being able to defend herself on any creep on the street, getting compliments around every corner saying how beautiful she is, and becomes super popular. Meanwhile, I Want to Be Oil tycoon and TV personality Maxwell Lord, played by Pedro Pascal, has been on the hunt for the stone for his wishes of having a successful business and power to come true. And after he manages to seduce Barb at a party after meeting in the museum earlier, he takes the stone from Barb's office and brings it to his nearly desolate building, and wishes to become the Dreamstone itself, the official name of the artifact, as the fates of dust like Thanos snapped out of existence. But earlier, as Diana is suspicious of Maxwell Lord, Lord as he is hitting on both her and Barb, and stalking him at a party for his donation to the museum. She realizes her wish did come true as an unrecognizable man starts talking to her and spouting lines from the first Wonder Woman film, as she gets confused until a man gives her a watch as she looks up, and she sees the love of her life, Steve Trevor, once again in her arms. It's explained that because of the wish, Steve's soul woke up in somebody else's body, and Diana can only see Steve through her eyes, as Diana has to show Steve what this future is to him, as a parallel to the first film, but the roles were reversed. Meanwhile, Diana and Steve try to find the Dreamstone to explain all of this, but they realize that Max Lord took it and they have to find him. Meanwhile, Max quickly becomes the most successful businessman he's always wanted to be. From paying off his debts to the dry land he owns suddenly becoming spiked with oil, and slowly becoming the most powerful man in the world, without he was able to cheat his wishes by other people granting them for him, as he slowly starts to deteriorate as he grants more wishes. Diana and Steve start going on a global adventure in their invisible jet that Diana manages to have the power to do, as they come across Max Lord in Egypt, trying to cut a deal with his competitors, but after they decline, he turns their goons into Max's personal entourage, as Diana and Steve chase after them, but slowly, as it was hinted at earlier, that Diana isn't as powerful or strong as she used to be and starts to bleed and feel pain when she gets hurt, and isn't bulletproof like before, and that's the reason why Max goes away. Max manages to work his way up to the president at the White House, as the world starts to fall into chaos because of the butterfly effect of these wishes, like his collide with the chance of meatballs, and eventually gains the influence and power of the president to broadcast himself across the world. After he learns about the president's personal broadcasting system that connects the satellites across the globe so he can broadcast to everyone at once and no longer deteriorate, but quite the contrary. Diana should try to get Max Lord to stop him from doing any more damage, but Barb stops with both of them at the White House, despite she has helped both of them out on their journey thus far by looking up information about the Dreamstone, its origins and such. Once they realize that the Dreamstone takes away as much as it gives, like the monkey's paw, and that because of the wish, it takes away your best quality, hence why Diana isn't as strong as she usually is. After realizing that they need to renounce their wishes to stop this, both her and Barb refuse this and try to find their solutions. But as Diana and Steve try to stop Max Lord from leaving the White House, Barb stops them on their way, and because she is so much stronger than Diana because of their wishes, she beats them and the other guards that are senseless as she and Max Lord head to the broadcasting station. Then as Diana and Steve see the destruction happening around them, they both realize that Diana needs to renounce her wish and let Steve go. She renounces her wish as she immediately regains her powers and heads to the broadcast station to finish this once and for all. Meanwhile, Max Lord is able to regain his health and broadcast himself to the world, as his powers into chaos because of everybody's wishes being granted as Diana shows up, dressed up in his golden armor, hidden in her apartment that was hinted at earlier, that was worn by the legendary Amazonian warrior Asteria, who shielded herself in his armor with these giant golden wings to fend off the Romans who were trying to tear down Themyscira long ago, and sacrificed herself to save the island from them, since the armor fended off the entire army. Diana shows up and is ready to fight Barb, who now is fully transformed thanks to Max Lord granted her wish becoming an apex predator, and like any human before, and transforming into this cheetah human hybrid. So Wonder Woman and Cheetah fight for a little bit against these power lines, and after Cheetah scratches away at her wings, Diana defends herself and is able to beat Cheetah by outsmarting her, since her most valuable quality that she lost was her humanity, and Diana taking advantage of that, and being able to electrocute Cheetah while both are in the lake and knocks her out. Then she goes to stop Max Lord's plan, but he's too powerful to be stopped, as the US and Soviets are at the brink of nuclear war, ending the entire plan as we know it, but she manages to wrap the lasso of truth around Max and shoots damage that he's caused, and how it is affecting his son Alistair, wandering around a dangerous and broken city, as the lasso of truth is broadcast to the entire world, showing everybody that regardless of what they've done, as Diana speaks about nobody being able to obtain the whole world but just the truth, and that's all there is, referring back to the opening scene of the film, when it said when Diana was a little girl, competing in these Themyscira Olympics. After she tries to cheat her way into winning by taking shortcuts to win this race, her aunt Topi stops her and gives her the same monologue that she gives to Max Lord, as she convinces him to stop this madness and renounce his wish, along with everybody else on the planet apparently, as nuclear holocaust is prevented. Then Max Lord goes to see his son after he saw where he was in the lasso of truth, as everybody, including Barb, starts to go back to their normal selves. The film flash forwards to a few months later, supposedly during Christmas, perfect timing, as she meets the guy whose body was inhabited by Steve, as they have a nice little conversation, as the film ends off with her swinging off into the sky, finding her whenever she goes, as credits roll, to a mid-credit scene of another strong woman saving a baby and her mom from being squashed by a telephone pole by catching it, as she's revealed to be Asteria, the woman who originally wore the golden armor in the flashback sequence earlier in the film, played by the OG Wonder Woman herself, Linda Carter, as credits roll. The film's unapologetic in being a lighthearted comic book movie, very much going back to the days of the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and does stand out amongst all the other comic book properties that come out at least once a month now, along with it yet being another unique film inside what is left of the DCEU at this point. The acting is great across the board, the film is very streamlined and we only getting 4 main characters to be focused on in the film, our 2 heroes and our 2 villains. Speaking of each one individually, Gal Gadot once again steals the show as a title character herself, and proves her stance on the legacy of Wonder Woman, and able to be such an inspiration for a new generation of comic book fans, but also portraying the flawed side of her character in ways that she feels 3-dimensional, and not just being an invincible superhero, especially the scene where she has to give up Steve for the greater good, really showing how much Gal Gadot has grown as an actress from the Fast and Furious days, and this is, in my opinion, the best performance of her career thus far. Chris Pine once again is very likable and down to earth as Steve Trevor, and his dynamic with Gal Gadot is just as good as the first film, and still one of the better romances I've seen in the comic book film, and the fact that he gets to have the same experience that Diana had in the first film, it is fun to see those roles reversed, along with his comedic timing being on point. Kristen Wiig is one of the newcomers in Barb, aka the Cheetah, is something that I didn't really know what to think about because from the trailers, she looked like she was just going to be a version of a mistreated, unpopular person that gets jealous of the hero and turns evil, like Jim Carrey in Batman Forever, or Jamie Foxx in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, or Topher Grace in Spider-Man 3. Although I won't say it's far off from that, she does a good job of selling this character's slow transformation to becoming evil. It's not like she switches personalities once she gets this wish. It takes time to really manifest her, and she does a good job of selling every scene she's in. Another example of what comedic actors can do just as well in other genres. And Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord, being his second time acting in a Wonder Woman property since he acted in a Wonder Woman TV pilot back in 2011, a little fun fact for you, he fits into the role he's playing, this scenery chewing over the top hammy villain that does have a heart but is shrouded in greed and power, and Pascal managed to really bring his character to life and make you remember him long after the credits roll of the film. Being he has such a fiery personality to him that makes him a blast to watch on screen. Another big praise I had to give the film is the production design. The film really does pay attention to the detail of what the 80s looked like. It's not the first to tackle the nostalgia of the 80s. It does transport you back to that time and makes some of the more hokey aspects of the story feel more in line with what the film's going for. Not to mention the costume design in the film is incredible. From all the cheesy 80s attire Steve wears to Wonder Woman's badass golden armor that we've seen put in every single piece of advertising for this film, Max Luthor's blue leisure suit looking like Cousin Eddie from Christmas Vacation, it's all done very well. Another aspect that works here is Hans Zimmer's score. He always elevates any film he's a part of, and the score for this film is very bombastic and gets you pumped for whatever exciting action scene is about to erupt, and can also make you feel teary-eyed in some scenes. And this new rendition of the Wonder Woman theme that he and Junkie Ezel created for her back in BVS is given more of an orchestral, lighter ambience to it, and it works very well for the tone and character for this film. The directing in the film is also well done, and dare I say, Patty Jenkins may have improved herself upon the first film, because some of the clunkier aspects of that first film, mainly regarding the action in the third act, are lessened in this film, and everything feels a lot more smoother and the acting is better in my opinion, because we have less characters to focus on, making the film feel more streamlined. And I do like the aspect of taking Wonder Woman in the Spider-Man 2 Logan route, and giving her stakes and not being this invisible superhero for the entire film. It was a good idea in keeping the audience and characters at bay. Although I knew she wasn't gonna die, I did feel a little on edge during the action scenes because she's vulnerable, which is nice to see in a superhero film. And the winks and nods to the classic Linda Carter series is fun to see, especially when she herself appears in the mid-credits scene. I hope she just play a bigger part in a future Wonder Woman film. The film also has a very Indiana Jones feel to it, with Diana and Steve going after his artifact in different countries, like its Uncharted 5 Wonder Woman DLC. I definitely think that the message that this film's going for, although they may be a little too hand-fisted and cliche at points, do work in the film's context, and the fact that it doesn't go for the generic route of killing off these villains in a giant explosion or something, rather making them realize that their humanity is very unexpected. I do give the film credit for having some of those odd directions that do make it stand from every other DC film thus far. This film is nowhere near as good as the first film in my opinion. Despite I do have a lot of good to say on the film, I do think it's a good film as a whole, I do have my fair share of things I have to criticize about this film. Firstly is the tone. The film is a lot more goofy and lighthearted, and although I can see younger audiences and families not having an issue with that, for me it throws the entire arc of this character off, because this film really doesn't care about continuity. I don't have an issue with the film wanting to be more independent and not trying to tether itself to the existing universe, but this film gives no shits about connecting to BVS, or even the first Wonder Woman film at points, about why standing all of a sudden out of the open just saving people, with the point of why she left for centuries because she gave up on them. Not to mention in the third act when the entire world is literally falling into chaos, like it's the collapse of the first Kingsman film when Mr. Valentine's satellites went off. It doesn't make sense that it would just be forgotten about by the entire world, and it just doesn't make sense from a character standpoint. And in the future, when you watch both these films back to back, it won't feel right unless you know the context of what happened with DC and Warner Bros. It's like watching Gremlins and then Gremlins 2, or the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Texas Chainsaw 2. It doesn't really feel like a sequel. It honestly would have made more sense, despite it probably would have had to remove the sillier aspects. I think this should have been set after Justice League, whichever version you prefer. So at least it doesn't break the timeline of these movies. And you're probably saying that I'm taking the continuity too seriously. Well, when I've watched all these movies and reviewed them, I want them to matter in future films that take place in the same universe with the same cast. This isn't a Robert Pattinson Batman situation where the timeline really doesn't matter because that film's not going to be in the same universe. Gal Gadot has been Wonder Woman for 4.5 years now, and the films around her have changed so drastically, and that wouldn't be an issue if DC was truly leaving Zack Snyder behind, but he's still around, and he's bringing his cut of Justice League right around the corner supposedly in a few months, and he might get to do more on HBO Max. Not to mention he and his wife are producers on this film, on top of every other film that is in the works in DC. That seems like every single one of them is in their own universe, and it's a little frustrating. But backing out the continuity flaws, the film's tone for me just doesn't really work a whole lot, at least not as much as the first film, where I have that balance of hopefulness and badassery, and you get pieces of that here, but it's a lot more tongue-in-cheek to fit the era it's set in, and for me, I want a more mature story that doesn't make it feel like a CW show with how much it feels like an artificial movie, and lacks a lot of that tension and emotion that the first film brought, minus Wonder Woman's healing issue saying goodbye to Steve again, which I've always seen coming ever since the filmmakers announced that Chris Pine was coming back for the film. Another aspect that makes it feel like a CW show is the VFX and action scenes. The VFX all look pretty fake, and anything that wasn't real, like the costumes or the makeup on characters like Cheetah, not talking about the CGI crap, stuck out like a sore thumb. And the action, while it's good serviceable fun, it's not really memorable. There's something about that that's missing. Maybe it's the effects, maybe it's because most of them have been shown in the trailers that have been around for over a year at this point, but they don't excite me as much as the No Man's Land scene, or the famous scary beach attack in the first film, or even the blow of the third act. They had to punch to them because they had more of a serious tone that this film lacks, making everything feel more farcical. I'm not asking for a Dark Knight trilogy tone here, but something that reflects a PG-13 rating rating, and not something a 7-year-old could watch and be okay with. Minus the blood that's shown when Wonder Woman gets shot and a few curse words here and there. And the film has its handful of cliches and plot holes. With how Wonder Woman was able to broadcast her lasso of truth to the entire world that looked like Pennywise's deadlights, how Wonder Woman was able to hide in plain sight when in the 80s, although it wasn't as advanced as today, that she was able to leave absolutely no trace by just knocking out a couple of security cameras, and do this for decades. To the typical villains teaming up in the third act, and other issues. And my last negative is that for a 2.5-hour movie, it didn't need to be that long. This film definitely has spots where it could have been shortened to cut out unnecessary bits that just weren't needed in the story, and some of us aren't explained, like how Max, Lord, and Cheetah got away, and did they just live their lives normally again, or went to jail, gets unresolved. It's definitely a film that has a lot of baggage to it. Overall, Wonder Woman 1984 is a decent film, but it's nowhere near as good as the first film, and I do consider the first one a little overrated as it is already, and it's a sequel that's better looked as an Elseworld story, rather than continuing the continuity and storylines of the first film, for the most part, and is now defunct it seems like DCU. The film does have great acting, a great score, a handful of aspects that do improve upon the first film like the directing, villains, and the production design, a lot of really fun Easter eggs, being unapologetic and trying to reach that childhood nostalgia of classic superhero movies that did put a smile on my face enough, serviceable action, fun dialogue and banter between our characters, especially between Steve and Diana, being more streamlined and focusing on a small group of characters, giving our main character stakes, and it's an entertaining film as a whole, but it has a myriad of issues on the flip side. The goofier tone doesn't work as well for me, making the film feel like a CW show and less investing. The over-reliance on CGI doesn't help its case as well. The film does ham-fist its messages a little too much. The MacGuffin storyline of this Dreamstone, we've seen many times before in different iterations, completely ignoring continuity with its universe, and even with its predecessor, not really having memorable action, not having 80s soundtrack despite being set in that time period, and being slightly too long for its own good. It runs into being a decent film that if you're in the mood to watch, and you like this character in the first film, I think you'll have a good enough time. I give Wonder Woman 1984 a B-, a 7 out of 10, and a rented recommendation. So that's Wonder Woman 1984. What do you guys think about it? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, and please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more content. I'm CBMF Productions, and this is not the last DC film to review, because justice needs to be served.